Welcome to Blackhawks Insider, the official podcast of the Chicago Blackhawks, presented by ChevyDrivesChicago.com. Drive what Captain Jonathan Toews drives. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Simplecast, Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you use, and like our YouTube page, as well as all videos are posted on the Blackhawks YouTube channel. Welcome into a very special NHL trade deadline episode of Blackhawks Insider. I'm Chris Vosters, joined by my co-host Kaylee Chelios and Colby Cohen. All right, we're doing things a little bit different this week. It's kind of like a 2-for-1 week. Today's episode of Blackhawks Insider is going to be a little bit different because the trade deadline is about 48 hours away. The Blackhawks have, of course, been very active in the days leading up to the trade deadline. Defenseman Jack Johnson was traded to the Colorado Avalanche for Andreas Englund. The biggest trade so far, of course, involved Sam Lafferty and Jake McCabe going to the Toronto Maple Leafs for Joey Anderson, Pavel Gogolev, a prospect, and a 2025 first-round pick and a 2026 second-round pick. So the Blackhawks really adding to their draft capital through 2025 and beyond. Of course, the elephant in the room right now is the ultimate landing destination for superstar Patrick Kane. We are recording this episode on Tuesday before Friday's trade deadline. It's going to be aired officially on Wednesday, and in this minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour world that the NHL exists in leading up to the trade deadline, the Patrick Kane to New York Rangers trade could be official by the time this podcast actually airs. So, as of right now, as of this taping, no deal has been announced. Patrick Kane is still a Blackhawk, although it certainly looks like, if you're reading the tea leaves, that Patrick Kane is going to be a New York Ranger by the end of the week. Now, to the point of the 2-for-1 element of Blackhawks Insider this week, we'll have another episode coming out on Friday following the conclusion of the deadline. We'll have reactions to the final landing spot for Patrick Kane, whatever the case may be, and of course, how the trade deadline ultimately reaches its conclusion for 2023. So, lots of stuff coming on our social media channels. Please stay tuned. And the best part about this episode, in addition to the time spent with Kaylee and Colby, is that we've got ESPN SportsCenter anchor and NHL play-by-play broadcaster John Buccigross as our guest. So we really enjoyed our conversation with Bucci, as we all knew that we would. But first of all, Colby, what do you think of the Blackhawks trade moves so far, even excluding Patrick Kane? What was your take on the big trade specifically with the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Yeah, look, I think Kyle Davidson turned Sam Lafferty into a second-round pick, a guy that he brought in here last year when he took over as interim GM. He traded Alex Nylander to Pittsburgh, who went right to the American Hockey League. He brings Sam Lafferty back, Derek King, and then Luke Richardson really fall in love with this player. The rest of the league falls in love with this player. And then you turn around and you flip him to Toronto for a second-round pick. I mean, that is asset management at its finest. And then you look at Jake McCabe, who is a beloved guy here in this locker room. And, you know, you turn him into a first-round pick. And you look at Toronto's roster. You look at where they are going. And I think that first-round pick for Toronto could end up being a very high pick. It's top 10 protected in 25, which I think for a reason, because I think by that time Matthews will be gone and Nylander will be gone and Tavares and Marner will be in the last years of their deal. So that could end up being a top 10 or potentially even lottery pick in 2026. So I like the long game. It's part of this rebuild. You don't need to have everybody at once. Spread out development, spread out entry times into the league. So I thought that was a great case of asset management for Kyle Davidson.
I totally agree, Colby. And one thing that Kyle Davidson said that really stood out to me is, hey, we don't want to clump all of our draft capital in 2023 or even 2023 and 2024. Yes, everyone is buzzing about the depth of those draft classes, but it's good to start accruing draft capital in 2025, 2026, because maybe you use those draft picks, maybe you trade them for assets later on. The situation is going to be a lot different in 2025 than it is now in 2023. So I like kind of the long-term options that having an extra first-round pick in 2025 gives the Blackhawks. Kaylee, obviously a big week, a big trade deadline for the Blackhawks. We kind of all knew this was coming, as the Blackhawks were presumed to be sellers at the trade deadline, and they are. What are your thoughts on the Blackhawks' moves so far?
I'll just be short and sweet with what I think about the trade deadline. The job of the executive team and Kyle Davidson is to make this team improve, to make it better, to set them up to be successful, and I think they've done just that. And the players that they've lost are going on to bigger, better things, like Sam Lafferty, Jake McCabe. I expect them to have great performances as they look to go for a playoff run here. And on the other side, I think there's a deep class, 10 picks in the 2023 trade class, or draft class, a lot to look forward to if you're a Blackhawks fan. And for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to, as a broadcaster working for a seller, I can't wait to watch what these players are going to do on other teams. Being from Tampa Bay, it was quite the opposite situation. So it's going to be a lot of fun to keep tabs on former Blackhawks, and obviously more than anybody, Showtime at MSG, as devastating as it is as a Blackhawks fan, there's got to be a little piece of you that's excited to see what he could potentially do there if things work out.
Totally, and that's what we get into with John Buccigross, the keystone piece of this week's episode, this week's part one episode, if you will. Remember, we've got another episode of the Blackhawks Insider podcast coming out on Friday after the conclusion of the trade deadline. So for now, let's get to our interview with ESPN's John Buccigross, where we talk about Patrick Kane, the Blackhawks trade moves so far. We think you'll really enjoy it. Hey, Bucci, great to be with you. Thanks a lot for doing this, especially this week with so much going on relative to the NHL trade deadline. Let's just get right down to it. All right, Patrick Kane. General manager Kyle Davidson said that talks with the Rangers are in a little bit of a holding pattern right now. Every indication is that he's going to be a New York Ranger by the trade deadline at the very latest. What is your take on this saga involving Patrick Kane, especially as it's become a rather drawn-out process?
It's been interesting. I think it's added a nice soap opera element to a long NHL season. The NHL sometimes lacks some of that juice in terms of conflict and superstars. We see it in the NBA a lot. So I kind of like it a little bit. It gives a long regular season some drama, some theater. Obviously, Patrick Kane, for my money, as of now, the greatest American-born hockey player of all time. Possibly Austin Matthews, the only person alive now that probably has a chance to eclipse that down the road if he gets 800 goals, which he's kind of on track to if he plays a long time. So, but for my money, Patrick has meant more to American hockey, especially this young generation. He's not only a great player, but he's an influential player. Players growing up wanted to be like him. He brought a style and really a patriotism too. He was so proud to wear the USA sweater. And I don't think that gets talked about a lot too. He really brought a pride to USA hockey and loved, even though USA and hockey in general has lacked best on best tournaments, which I think has been a big loss for the league. It's the one big L against Gary Bettman is they have not had these tournaments that really grow the game like they do in the World Cup we saw. So for Patrick to kind of, obviously no movement clause, he controls it, goes wherever he wants. Decided in the end it was New York or nothing, it appears. And so therefore, the Rangers have the Hawks over a barrel. They really, they probably won't get a first round pick. I had heard Zach Jones, a young defenseman, saw play at UMass in college, kind of a slightly built defenseman. Not sure if he can make it at this level. We'll see. Maybe a second or third or something. I guess you got to respect the process a little bit. But overall, Patrick wants to end up in New York. I think it's a good place for him. It'll be great for the league, great for the city. He'll electrify the city, electrify the room. Not, when Messier went back to New York, obviously that was just such an immense amount of juice. Not sure if this is that. He had won 5 cups. Patrick has 3. He's American born. I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, Mess made an interesting point about that. Just even though he had 5 cups, just the fear of not knowing if he was going to continue to have this storied second life, and Patrick Kane seems to have talked to some of his former teammates about that same thing. Bucci, I'm curious just with how much you're behind the scenes and GMs and their relationships and their dynamics. Was there potentially a different outcome for Patrick Kane had this deal gotten done sooner? Do you think that there was any possibility, like you said, of this happening and maybe the Tarasenko trade doesn't get done before? Or what were you hearing behind the scenes about what it might have taken for Chris Drury to get Kane?
Right. Well, certainly our Emily Kaplan reported about a hip issue. Maybe the Rangers were concerned about. Don't know if that was negotiation or fact. You never know for sure. You're always trying to play your own angle to give up as least as possible. I think the Rangers, and who knows? We know that agents have conversations with agents and who have conversations with GMs off the record. And if Patrick Kane told somebody in New York that he's only going to go to New York, well, that makes it much easier. And at this point, I don't know if Pat wants to help out the Hawks in any way. I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. But that's another factor. That's why I like this. It is just sports in the end, but there's so much human drama and ego and hurt feelings and strategy. There's a lot there. But yeah, I think we all wondered, would Kane go play with McDavid in Edmonton? That'd be pretty cool, even for just a couple of months. I don't think he'd sign there long term. Obviously, Patrick comes with a big entourage, a big family, so you need to take care of that. You need to have proper housing, and proper infrastructure to deal with that, and his whole group. Yes, a lot of infrastructure with Patty Kane. So that's part of it. And has a lot of that. They can take care of anything. Big city of dreams. So I'm sure in his mind, he was like, maybe do I go here? Do I go here? Do I go and play with Austin Matthews, my fellow American? Do I go play with McDavid, the greatest talent of our generation? Do I go to Boston, who's, that's a top 3 hockey city in America? It doesn't get any bigger and better in Boston, plus with the best team right now. So you just don't know what's in his mind. And I'm really curious what's up for next year. Like, what does he want to do next year? And so the Patrick Kane story has always been fascinating, especially with all his success in Chicago, 3 cups. And then, like I said, probably the best American-born player ever. Now, this last chapter is getting really interesting. What does he do now? Look like it's going to be the Rangers here in a matter of hours, whether it be 24 or 8. And then what did you do next year? Like, it's really cool. It's going to be it's going to give the offseason a lot of juice, I think. Not only the draft with Connor Bedard that you all might get, but then Patrick Kane. And what if they get Bedard? Does he come back to Chicago and they speed up this rebuild right away and then sign some other free agents? Because that'd be easy. Between Patrick and Connor, they'll get anybody they want. So that would really be interesting if suddenly it flipped like that as well.
Bucci, sorry, really quick, Colby, I want to ask then on that note, if he is just a rental, and let's just kind of play what if, who would you want to see him play with? Would you rather see him go to a McDavid, Draisaitl, or would you rather see 2 of the best American-born players team up in Toronto between Matthews and Kane?
Well, I'd always prefer he stay in America. Just the stronger American teams we have, the better the ratings are, and then we get raises. That's what this is all about. We want the business to succeed. But no, I think New York is the best place for him. They have a better chance of winning the cup than certainly Edmonton. Toronto's right there as well. The goalie's the big factor there. Will they have enough? Even the defense, we'll see if there's enough elite stuff there or high end stuff there. But I think New York, what it would do for the city and the league and the Eastern Conference is just bonkers. It's historical what's going on in the Eastern Conference. This has never happened before like this when the best teams in the league. It's very rare that 2 best teams in the league are from the same conference, much less 5 or 6. It is an absolute bloodbath, this Eastern Conference playoff. And so I think New York, to me, would just make this bonfire even bigger.
Well, I think it's well documented that your passion has always been hockey, whether ESPN has had it or not. You've carried that flag for a very long time. You go golfing in the summer with big groups of hockey people that range, all over the spectrum. So as someone who's been around this sport a very long time, do you see any way this trade doesn't happen? I mean, as of right now, the trade hasn't happened. It's Tuesday morning. New York has some hoops to climb through, and this deal has been, put into a holding pattern. I mean, the NHL wants this to happen, I would assume, because Showtime on Broadway seems like a play. But a deal's not done till a deal's not done.
Mm-hmm. I just think there's too many powerful figures at hand here, from the agent to obviously the original 6 team to Patrick himself. I think they'll get it done. And Pat Brisson is his agent, right? I'm a little cloudy from trying. Yeah, he runs the league. Okay, he runs the league, maybe more than Gary Bettman. So if he wants to get it done, if Patrick wants to get it done, it'll get done. They'll find a way to get it done. And so yeah, I do think it's between cap and now in the end, Chicago could say like that's just not good enough. We don't want to value the trade deadline and so we're just going to let him walk. And then whatever. But I don't think they would do that to Patrick and his legacy. He really wants to go to New York. He's made that franchise. The franchise value, mainly because of him, more than any other player, has increased by hundreds of millions of dollars. He has sold so many jerseys, so many tickets. And so they, at this point, and because they chose to go this route in terms of rebuilding, which in the end is probably the smart play. We see Ottawa's about to be great for 10 years and all these teams are ready to go after, it's just going to last a long time. That's the only problem. Detroit hasn't won a playoff series in almost 10 years. I don't think, they haven't been in the playoffs in 7. I mean, that's a long time, people. And I just think I did a Buffalo game the other day. Like if you're 16 years old, like you're roughly in Buffalo, like you haven't seen your team play a playoff game. If you're like 21, you haven't seen them win a playoff series. Like imagine that. And like you're buying tickets and you're going to the game every year. And so that's why you have to be careful when you go through this. But they owe Patrick that if he wants to do it, between that and the power players involved, I think it's going to get done.
Bucci, I appreciate you highlighting the impact of this trade from a national perspective and what it can do for the league. In my bubble, I'm really looking at this through a Chicago Blackhawks lens. As it looks like the Blackhawks really aren't going to get a big return for Kane, is there any kind of silver lining to this trade for Blackhawks fans?
I don't think so. Not that I can think of. I don't know if you do it in the summer, if you did it last summer, even if you packaged them both together. But of course, the cap numbers were just astronomical. You wouldn't do it unless you ate some of it. They could have eaten some of it. They could have done that. They probably could have eaten half of it for both with the route they took, and then maybe like you said, maybe a 1 and a 2. And stuff like that. But again, that team, whoever did that and then maybe you could have done it where he could also sign an extension to wherever he was going, because teams are in a better position to plan their cap, obviously in the summer and then down the road. So maybe that was the only way it could have been done. And again, who knows? We read they didn't come to me, he didn't come to us, but you never know if that's really true or not. There's so many different channels you can go through to communicate things to people in this business. And I don't know if that was done in the offseason, but in the end, that probably would have been the way to go if Chicago tried that. Maybe they did, and maybe Patrick said no, but they don't want to publicly embarrass him, or vice versa. That's also a part of it too. Sometimes there's manners in politics and long-term, PR moves, image moves that everyone does. So that's just real. So, but no, at this point, I don't think how there's a positive in all this, except that if they do him right. And then that's a signal to other people in the future, because Chicago will always be a free agent destination. So if they do him right and other players see this, okay, here's an organization that took care of a guy. And so I like that. And that could affect me signing with that team if it comes down to a close call.
Have you seen anything like this play out either in hockey or other sports that you've covered, where you've got a star player who's traded by his team at the deadline? The team that he's been with his entire career is in the middle of a rebuild. The team is trying to do right by him, but also position itself for the next era. Have you ever seen anything like this kind of play out, even in approximation?
Well, a little bit, the Ray Bourque thing, a little bit, where Bourque was this guy who had never won a Stanley Cup, his Hall of Fame career, went to 2 finals with the Bruins, lost to Edmonton both times, first with Gretzky, then without him, and just Messier, late 80s, early 90s. And, he was reaching the end, and he wanted to go to Philadelphia because it was closer to home, easier for his family to get to the games. But, at the time, Harry Sinden didn't want to trade him to the Eastern Conference. And so in the end, he went to Colorado. They lose conference final that first year. He's like, all right, I'll give it one more shot. And they come back and he wins the Stanley Cup. And then he brought the cup back to Boston, and they had like a celebration in City Hall Plaza, which that was pretty much 100% accepted, which shows you the equity that Bork had with that city, that you could do that. Imagine Johnny Damon bringing back a Yankee World Series trophy to Boston.
That would not have gone over
well. But that just would not have gone over well. But Bork had such an angelic sainthood presence about him, and again, what he did for the city and his excellence and his quiet, humble nature, that they're like, yeah, man, go get yours and bring it back, and we'll drink beer out of it, Narragansett Light with you, So this is a little, again, this is a little different. Patty has already won 3 cups. He doesn't need another cup. So and he's got tons of money, and he's got a legacy of a Hall of Famer, obviously. So now it's just, and I think one thing with Patrick, and I think it was real, to become the Hawks all-time leading scorer and to be number 1 on all those lists, and that probably was kind of a thing to him. But now it's, once he sees losing stinks and rebuilding's tough on an older player, let's figure out another chapter. And like I said, the first, I guess the first thing is go to a city like New York and try to win a cool cup and contribute to a city that if you do that, then you're a hero forever. Like Messi, like those New York Ranger teams, those guys go back and they're still heroes all this time later, 30 years later almost. So, I'll go there and do that. Then I'll decide, where do I play next? Do I join one of these up and coming young teams? And, like in Ottawa, I said, I don't think it's going to be Ottawa, but a team like that who's on the way up, so it's going to be real. Like I said, it's going to be very fun this summer to see what the next chapter of Patrick Kane is after this kind of little mini series he's going to provide this spring.
Do you have a guess?
Playoffs.
Like, if you had to make one guess, I mean, you're pretty good. You're kind of big on Twitter at like reposting something that you tweeted like 2 or 3 years prior that does end up happening.
An ego.
Yeah,
wow.
but you're right. So. That's the thing. Like, you're right about them. And I saw you be right on the Pasternak thing. I mean, there's been a number of things that you tweeted, and then all of a sudden that contract looked exactly that way. Now, you either got an in at Central Registry, or so who's your prediction? Like, if you had to make a prediction, and I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, give us one that really would make sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've done kind of the whole little quick Rolodex in my brain. I mean, obviously, the number 1 spot is to return home to Buffalo, right? A team that's ready to win. They have cap room. They're ready to go right now. Now, they're more about a goalie than Patrick Kane, but still, that's like the number 1, obviously, thing. Does a kid go back home and see if he can bring that city, of all cities in America, a championship in Buffalo, New York? I mean, that would be the ultimate payoff for that'd be the biggest bet for him. That'd be the biggest payoff of any bet he makes on himself. He doesn't have to make any bets. Like I said, he is what he is. Does he go to Arizona and join that team? I don't think they're quite ready yet. Does he go to LA because it's Los Angeles, showtime in LA, and that team is just about kind of there. So he's got options in that regard. Stevie Y in Detroit. Again, is he the answer there? They need. I think they still need more there. But I think that's what's cool. Again, I'm glad you brought that up, Colby. There's actually multiple places he can go. He's got options of teams who are rising, where he can continue to produce, have fun, win, first cup, and then play in the place he wants to play in too. That's the thing too. Where does he want to live? Where does he want to raise kids? Where does he want his kids to maybe then go to school and live there for the, what I mean? So he can, that's also a factor for him having a young family. Or am I going to be in Chicago forever? I'm going to be here. And they don't have a team wherever he wants to go. So there's a lot there. This is a really fertile ground for writers and podcasters and broadcasters to talk about. Patrick's going to provide a lot of content going forward.
Bucci, I want to shift gears a little bit to the agent-media relationship. And you mentioned Pat's powerful agents. I mean, he represents Taves, Kane, Jones, a number of big-time players, and he's been at the top for so long. I know Colby just mentioned Central Registry. I know I've always been told, like, if you have an in or an insider at Central Registry, like, that's so big. But, like, I remember in Tampa, it was a huge deal when Nikita Kucherov and Panarin's agent leaked to one of the reporters that Steve Yzerman, you mentioned him, was going to be stepping down as the general manager before anybody had a chance to break it, before any of the insiders do. What do you see behind the scenes, or do you have any stories of an agent that maybe should or shouldn't have leaked certain information about a player to media? And what is that dynamic like between the agent, player, and media? Because the player is obviously not talking to the media sometimes the way the agent is kind of giving off little tips here and there.
Right. Yeah. I can't stop looking at that bottle of Angel's Envy, Kaylee. So I didn't hear a lot of your question, but no,
I don't have any bullet,
no,
but I can text you a couple good
right.
ones
No.
I've tried.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah, I see some Jameson too. That is kind of fun. I enjoy that part of it, hearing from coaches, sometimes players, occasionally agents. I don't have a lot of, agents will check in once in a while, but I don't bother them that much. I just kind of, sometimes some stuff comes my way, but that kind of game, that insider game and stuff, that's a grinding, seems like a real grinding type of unhealthy game from a physical health standpoint, and it doesn't really interest me too much. So, but occasionally if stuff comes my way, it is fun though. It's fun to talk about. It's fun to go out and have dinner and a glass of Angel's Envy and talk about the business. And it was fun at the All-Star game. Yes, American pours only, none of that Canadian eyedropper stuff. But we went down the All-Star game in Florida and went over to the I think it was the Ritz where a lot of the NHL people were. We weren't. We're at the Hampton Inn up the street, but
continental breakfast.
But yeah, but with a waffle, you make the waffle yourself. And is this really a sausage? I don't think this is actually a sausage. Not sure what these ingredients are. I think they were cutting plywood and made a sausage out of it. But yeah, you sit at the bar and all these people are coming up, like, Ovechkin handlers and guys who had maybe met or talked about, men and women, but had never put a face to a name and stuff. So that's pretty cool. And those are the fun. That's why the All-Star game is the best place, because everybody's there. And it's a good, during the finals, not everybody's at the finals. Summer's here, people go home and teams lose or get eliminated down to two teams. But the All-Star game is fun that way. You really get almost like this big warehouse of people. And it is fun to talk about, but occasionally you hear some stuff and some people are, some agents are more aggressive than others trying to get stuff out and coaches. I don't go fishing too much for it. So these days, so it's more just kind of casual stuff.
Well, obviously, Butchie, I think that, it's interesting to get your perspective as somebody that, we're on SportsCenter forever, and now you're in the booth calling NHL games, you're handling the studio, still doing the college hockey stuff. ESPN Plus, speaking of college hockey, it's really taken on a life of its own with the ability to watch prospects. The Hawks are in a rebuild. We're going to see a bunch of them coming up here in the NCAA tournament. They're sprinkled out all over good teams, all over the biggest programs. What has that meant, do you think, the ability for people to actually now easily turn on their app and watch these prospects that belong to teams like the Blackhawks fans? I know I'm always trying to tweet out, hey, you can watch so-and-so tonight on ESPN Plus, or you can watch So, I mean, how big do you think that is for really growing the sport and growing the game? And you're kind of on the forefront of that.
Yeah, it certainly has potential, Colby. I don't know if people are actually cashing in and doing that. Even last night, the McDavid game in Boston, it was an electric game. Obviously, McDavid wanted to prove a point with Pastrnak in the bar and a guy close to him. He always wants to, bring it up a notch against players like that. And people on Twitter, they're going like, man, this McDavid's amazing. I can't believe blah, blah, blah. I was like, he's on every night. You can watch all of his games at a very low cost, And I just wonder if our hockey fans are watching other games but their own team. And even like you said, the prospect, I love going back when I was a kid, when my team had a prospect, I couldn't wait to watch him, or especially when they got called up. And if you have a chance to see video of him, it was just unbelievable. Like going back to Ray Bourque, when he showed up in Boston, he was this mysterious figure. we knew he was coming. We knew he was on the way, but there was no way to get video in 1979 of Ray Borg playing hockey anywhere, in America when he's playing in Canada. And when he arrived, it was just like this mythical thing. So I hope that, we still have sports fans who are that invested and they look to the future. And I think a lot of hockey fans are. We see it on Twitter. But whether or not they're going to ESPN Plus and watching, these games, Hockey East, and now the tournament coming up. And what's good about the Hawks in Chicago and the great city that it is they're always a player for these free agents. If guys aren't drafted when they're 18, 19, then they go play college or they go play somewhere else or even, USHL before college. They can sign with anybody. They're a free agent. And those young kids usually want to go to big cities, New York, Boston, or Chicago. So that does give the Blackhawks an advantage for these guys who are undrafted. Now, very rarely they're phenoms. They tend to be, guys but Torrey Krug was a guy who wasn't drafted and the Bruins got him. He turned to be obviously a very good NHL player. So, that's a thing the Blackhawks fans can look forward to as well, that maybe can speed up this rebuild a little bit, is they can build depth by signing college free agents because they have the city.
Well, Cole Gutman looks like one of them, Butchie. I mean, we called his game.
Yeah.
He was awesome all year in the American League, and he's come up to Chicago, and he looks like an NHL player every which way. I mean, there are no holes in this guy's game, and he's in the end of his first pro year, not hitting a wall, not slowing down. He's been really impactful in his young NHL career, so that's a good example of a guy who doesn't sign in Tampa, and then he goes, well, wait, I want to go to Chicago. I want to go to a big city with a lot of opportunities. So that's a good total case in point.
Right, exactly. So that's a big thing. But yeah, I do hope people go, search out their prospects. And like I said, ESPN Plus is a great service for the hockey fan, for college and NHL, and they're there and they're fun to watch, and the game's fun to watch, and looking forward to doing the tournament again with you, Colby, this year in Tampa Bay. It'll be my 10th Frozen Four, and I think our fourth together, maybe just three.
No, I think we're up to 5. This will be 5.
Oh, well, your first one was a very forgettable performance.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we can all agree.
Bucci, to continue the talk about prospects, the Blackhawks now have got 2 first-round draft picks in each of the next 3 drafts. We've heard so much about the 2023 draft from your perspective, and I know you're no Emily Kaplan, but is the 2023 draft pool, and maybe even 2024, as deep as people are really saying it is?
Again, time will tell, right? You just don't know for sure, and it's fun. I like going back, looking at drafts, and when I prepare my game notes and my charts that I like to do by hand, I like to go back and see when a player was drafted, and I look at that draft, and some years just aren't that good. It's just part of being bad at the right time is being bad at the right time, and having those chances to get multiple guys and get those steals, Mikko Rantanen lasts until like 10th, and those are the difference makers. When you get a guy like that, and you get a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round, a Braden Point, Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, you got to get hitting a couple of 2nd, 3rd rounders, and to supplement the can't misses that obviously the Blackhawks are going to get a can't miss guy. In all likelihood, the odds are very high with their first pick this summer in Nashville. And then the other ones, you gotta do a good job. Part of it's luck. Let's face it, you're drafting 18-year-olds. You just don't know for sure. But some people do have the eye for talent and drive and a long career. And then how do you build an organization? How do you build the depth? How do you pick the right guy, the right position at the right time? It's tough, man. It's a lot of pressure. But these next 2 drafts do look very good, but they also can give them draft capital to maybe at some point, like I said, speed this process up if things go unexpectedly well. If you get Connor Bedard and he's good right away, well, that changes everything. That shrinks the rebuild very quickly. And suddenly maybe you can win when Bedard's 21, 22. A lot of these great players do great things at a very young age. Bobby Orr went through the air when he was 21, and Wayne Gretzky scored 92 when he was 21, and Sidney Crosby, won his first Stanley Cup, again, a very young age. So that's, and the league's only getting younger. So you can do a lot very quickly. So if they, between drafting well and then also using some of that draft capital, if it works out where they trade for a guy like a Timo Meier, a guy who's 27, 28, that they can extend, sign a free agent, which again, they're always going to be a destination. Things could happen quickly for the Hawks if everything goes right. Like, in 3 years, they could be right back at the top, in the top 8 of the conference.
Well, Butchie, everyone's pretty excited about the potential for Bedard and this draft class. And then with all the drama surrounding Patrick Kane, I wanted to get your thoughts just on Jonathan Toews. Kyle Davidson's been really transparent, and we appreciate, how honest he's been about allowing Jonathan Toews to return to full health and full strength, because it just hasn't been an easy year for him. It wasn't last season, and it just seems like it's continuing to be an uphill battle managing what he's going through. What are your thoughts on Toews and just the way his career has sort of transpired right now with everything going on?
Yeah, it's kind of sad. It's kind of fizzled in a lot of ways. Where Patrick Kane's career continues to go up. He settled down. He got married. He's got kids. He's dedicated to the game. He loves the game. He'd always called Jonathan Toews Captain Serious, but as it turned out, Patrick Kane, loves hockey and is in love with hockey, and looks like he's going to play for a long time because he just can't wait to get to the rink every day. He's stabilized his life off the rink. He's got a great family structure now, and just so much support, and I'm sure so much fulfillment. I'm sure he looks back and he's like, what was I doing when I was a young kid? Man, this is way better living like this, and this is what it's all about, having this family to love, and this and just I imagine he's so happy. Now the only thing for Patrick now is his career is kind of like, man, I kind of fizzled in Chicago. What am I doing? I'm sure his brain is still going around 100 miles an hour. But for Toews, yeah, it's kind of sad because it probably doesn't make much sense to bring him back. Kind of like what Billy Guerin did in Minnesota with Parise and Ryan Suter. They got to clean the air out and let someone else step into that void, and like Kaprizov, and let these other guys really blossom, because those guys have such a big stature. They take up so much air because of their legacy they built and who they are and their personalities and how serious they take it, and how hard they can probably be on young players because they run out of patience when they're used to winning. Now they're not. And so there's a lot of that. So I imagine this Jonathan Toews is going to his career is going to kind of fizzle into the night until they bring him back and retire his number, and then he'll get that amazing night, which certainly he deserves. So it is kind of sad. That's how I look at it, how everything has transpired for whatever reason. And now and how it's going to end, how they handle that is going to be kind of interesting. But I assume there's going to this is the end for Jonathan Toews in Chicago.
Their careers have been almost inextricably linked, Kane and Toews, and it's just weird to kind of see them diverge at this stage. You mentioned sad, and that's definitely the thought that comes into my mind as well. But Bucci, all right, we'll get you out on this, and thanks so much for doing this.
You bet.
The chicken parm viral tweet trend that you started.
The roasting of people on Twitter is the best. I mean, just roasting people's on Twitter. I mean, that's got to be the best part of it all, in my opinion.
I'm not sure if you ever envisioned chicken parm becoming such a sensation as it's turned out to be, but I got to ask, and I'm sorry, I hope that the questions and the tweets that you probably receive on a daily basis about chicken parm haven't become too annoying. But do you have a go-to chicken parm spot in Chicago? I'm dying to know.
Well, yeah, I went to a place where they put us up. I can't remember the hotel. I should have remembered. Was it tweeted out because someone asked me that, and I think I saved the tweet. I favored it. Same with Boston for when I go there. I should know the name. It was a great little bar. I walked downstairs, sat at the bar by myself, had a great parm, glass of red, nice little penne. It was phenomenal. But of course, when I post that, then you have the rest of Chicago giving me their opinion on the best place of the best parm. So I have plenty of options. But I'm gonna go back and look that up on Twitter, and I'll tweet it today and figure and let you know. So if you want to give it a shot, but yeah, it was excellent. I enjoyed it. It's not a hard meal to mess up. No, I never intended this to happen. I'll never win an Emmy, so I got to be remembered for something. So why not chicken parm? And it's weird. Like, and I sometimes I think of this this seems kind of new, and this latest iteration is where I've been like rating people's parm and stuff. But like I'll find some pictures or parm references from 2017. So this has kind of been going on for a little bit. It takes a while to build an empire, I think is what I'm saying. This stuff doesn't happen overnight, kids. Like you got to do the work. This is brick by brick, cheese by cheese. You have to build this one piece of mozzarella at a time. till you get where you are today. This just doesn't happen. You don't roll out of bed in your King Parm. Okay, it takes hard work and sweat.
I just got to ask, when you go out to dinner with Colby, have you seen Colby's take on chicken parm where he swaps out the marinara for the vodka sauce? I don't know how I feel about that, Bucci. Is that kind of crossing the line?
I don't find Colby to be a picky eater type of a guy. He's pretty, salt of the earth, or ribeye, team player when it comes to the
appetizers.
The team meal. Yeah, he's not.
We are at a point where I could pretty much order for Bucci in any kind of restaurant, depending on the cuisine. I know his order, and we order very similarly, so it's good because we can almost do the family style thing when we're having meals together, which we have a lot coming up.
That's right. You get that, I get this, and we'll do half of each. Yeah, then you get more bang for your buck. But yeah, overall, I think Colby's a great.
And our guy Barry Melrose, we leave him on his own because he orders his steak like a burnt puck. I mean, well done. Yeah. We can't understand it.
Barry grew up on a farm, so he sees how you actually make food. He does not want to have any pesticide or any irregularity in his meat. So it comes out on fire. They extinguish it down, and then he eats it.
Au natural, Barry Melrose.
Yes.
Bucci, thanks a lot for doing this. This was great, super illuminating, and thanks for letting us pick your brain on some of the ins and outs of the NHL, and especially through a Blackhawks lens right now. You're a legend again. We'll pump you up on your way out here, but it's super cool to get you on our podcast. All three of us have grown up watching you, and you're a great advocate, not just for hockey, but for sports media in general. So thanks very much for doing this, and can't wait to have you on again.
Oh, thank you guys. Doing a great job in Chicago. I love the energy and everything going on with the Blackhawks. I watch all the time on the ESPN Plus, and so keep it up. And you guys are forging your own path right now.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Our thanks once again to John Buccigross, and we will definitely be scouring his Twitter feed for if and when that Chicago chicken parm recommendation comes out. Definitely a lot of options in a city with as many fantastic food establishments as Chicago. Thanks once again for the contributions of my wonderful co-hosts, Colby and Kaylee. Of course, thanks once again to John Buccigross. Thank you to our producers, Trevor Bray and Jenna Rose. Again, this is just part one of a 2-episode week here on the Blackhawks Insider podcast, with the trade deadline creating mayhem in a good way on the NHL landscape. We've got you covered with this episode pre-deadline and an episode coming out on Friday post-trade deadline. And as always, if you don't have your Blackhawks content fix, just visit the team website, blackhawks.com, for more content. And thank you once again to Brad Dollar and Southside Jake for the music featured on the podcast. So, for now, we say so long on the Blackhawks Insider podcast. We will talk to you very soon. In fact, later this week after the trade deadline. So keep it right here on blackhawks.com and your favorite podcast platforms. Thanks for tuning in.